morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of our lecture series for the 21-22 school year, brought to you by SpedNet Wilton. We're so excited to have Dr. Jane Thierfeld Brown back with us today. She's going to discuss returning to class and campus, strategies to ease anxiety and improve mental health following the pandemic. And there's no better person to have with us today as we launch our kids back to school in this truly supercharged environment. Dr. Brown is just so knowledgeable and has such a reassuring and calming presence. And we're so grateful to have her here to help us start our kids back to school. Before I formally introduce Dr. Brown, I just have a few housekeeping matters to go over. First of all, we're so excited to launch our new website. Please take a look at www.spednetwilton.org. We hope you'll find it even more informative and inspiring. We have all of our webinars posted on the website, along with dozens of PowerPoints and related materials and articles. Also posted on our website, which has always been, is our guide to special services called Bringing Knowledge to the Table, How to Be an Effective Advocate for Your Child. Our guide walks you through the special services process in a very clear, concise, and user-friendly way. And we can provide you with a soft copy if you request it. And also, if you have kids in the Wilton Public Schools, you can receive a free copy of it from the district. And you can also purchase it on Amazon. We would like to thank our wonderful co-sponsors of today's presentation, Wilton Public Schools, Wilton Youth Council, and Darien CPAC. We're so grateful for their partnership. Our moderators today are Eve Kessler, Executive Director and co-founder of SpedNet Wilton, Carolina Corrigan, co-president of SpedNet Wilton, and I'm Janine Kelly. We also have with us today on our panel, Kelly DuPont from Darien CPAC, and welcome, Kelly. Just a few ground rules before we get started. For those of you familiar with our webinars, we just have a few ground rules to go over before we start. We're going to allow questions and answers at the end of the presentation, but please be mindful to type them into the Q&A and not into the chat. When they're typed into the Q&A, we can keep track of them better. Also, remember, this is an open forum, and it's also recorded. So any questions that you ask, please just keep in mind that they are presented out there to the public. So you want to just make sure that you keep confidential any information that you don't want out there in the public forum. Also, any information provided in this webinar by Dr. Brown or the moderators is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. The information, content, and materials are posted for your general purposes only. And now I can formally introduce to you Dr. Jane Thierfeld Brown. For those of you who don't know her, Dr. Brown is the director of College Autism Spectrum, former assistant clinical professor at Yale Child Study, and former director of student services at the University of Connecticut School of Law. She has 40 years experience working in the field of disability services and has appeared on Good Morning America, CBS News, and WNPR. She's also co-authored numerous articles, textbook chapters, and books, including the very helpful guides, Student with Asperger's, a guide for college professionals, the Parent Guide to College for Students on the Autism Spectrum, and Behavior Management and Self-Regulation. Dr. Brown consults with families, students, school districts, and institutions of higher education, and helps parents determine their teens' strengths and needs, make decisions as a family, and prepare their teens for the educational, executive functioning, and social challenges that lie ahead. For more information on Dr. Brown, you can visit our newly improved website, again, at www.spednetwilton.org. And with all that being said, welcome, Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much, Janine, for that wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And I appreciate all your co-sponsors also. This is such an interesting and difficult time when I can look at it from afar as if I'm not participating in it. It's fascinating to watch what's going on with everything, with the schools, with the colleges, with our country. It's when I realize that, oh yeah, I'm really living this and my family is too, that it suddenly gets real. And I think we're all feeling that way. So I'm going to attempt today to discuss some of the issues that we're all seeing and some strategies that we might use to deal with them. For those of you who do have kids that get accommodations or that have any kind of IEP at school, we've been discussing before we started the webinar what terminology to use. I'm going to use different terminology today. I'm more comfortable using what we use in higher ed, which is students with disabilities or disabled students, which is the current term of choice. I prefer students with disabilities, but I know many people are uncomfortable with that. So I'll bounce back and forth. I hope that's okay, to try and meet K-12 and higher ed language, and also knowing that some of you have kids that do have an IEP or get accommodations, and some of you do not. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you're going to see, oh, now you're going to see some slides. Let me just bring these up. Okay, so I'm going to hide my little thumbnail, so I won't be able to see you. So please let me know if there's questions, and I will be happy to stop and have some conversation. So, and hopefully we'll go through some information and then have some discussion. So we've called this Returning to Class and Campus Strategies, we hope, to ease anxiety and improve mental health following the pandemic. We've been trying to decide, we can't really say post-pandemic yet because we're still in the pandemic, but we're making plans for post-pandemic. So that's the kind of what we're really looking at. Going back to school, I would think this week. The first thing I think we need to think about when we talk about returning to classes and returning to campus is that the pandemic has truly made us look at our identity, who we are, what's important to us, where our values are. What one person said to me last week, which I thought was really jarring, was I realized that without my career, I don't feel like I have any value or any power. And the pandemic took away my career. And that was really jarring to me. How do you identify yourself if your career or if your life as a student is your entire identity? And what does that mean once that moved to remote learning, which may or may not have worked for some of our students? And what does it mean now re-entering? I'm mainly going to talk about our students today, but I can't talk about students without talking about the family and the parents. Our students, whether we know it or not, are absorbing emotion and feelings from us as parents, even if they're not expressed. Our students can feel what we're feeling in ways that we don't even imagine. And that we always say, oh, my kid's not that perceptive. And years later, we'll find out, yeah, they really were. They knew exactly what was going on. So I think we need to think about identity not only as who we are as parents, who we are as a family, who our children are as, even if they're adult children, who they are as people, who we are as professionals, as friends, as spouses. And all of that has been very affected by the pandemic. And I would suggest that most of us either haven't had the time or the brain space to really explore that. And now as we start to re-enter whichever environment we were in, we really have to decide what's coming back and what's not. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about this morning. This is from Bellevue College, a wonderful community, large community college in Washington State. And Sarah Gardner runs a neurodiversity program there. And she uses a quote from Alexander Den Heiger that I really like. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And that really strikes me because I think usually we're trying to fix the flowers, being our kids, and not the environment. And Sarah then quotes on the bottom, let's consider, is the college prepared for the student instead of, is the student prepared for college? We tend to really harp on the latter. And you can change college in this essence for school. Is the school prepared to bring students back rather than is the student ready to get back to school? And what is the school doing to make sure the students are ready and to and to really go through and look at what everyone has been through in the last 18 months. I think we really are focusing on the fact that the student needs to change and be ready for all these changes in their lives. And I would like to suggest today that it's not just the student. I know some of the schools are doing things like providing more mental health counseling and giving more time for students to talk about what the pandemic has been like for them. I think we may need more than that from what I'm seeing. A lot of our college students are either already back or they're moving back or they've been back for orientation or you name it, band camp, football camp, soccer camp, whatever it is. So our campuses already have a lot of students and there's been lots of these discussions, but it seems that everyone wants to have this discussion center on the student changing. And there's groups of us in higher ed saying we really need to look at our environments. We need to look at our administrations. We need to look at faculty. We need to look at the way we're teaching, because it really might be time for a change. Look at all the things that we were told were not possible before the pandemic that suddenly miraculously became possible, like telemedicine. We've been told for years that that cannot happen because you cannot deliver medical advice in cyberspace. Well, miraculously, when the world shut down, we could. And much of that is not going to change. Most docs are keeping telemed as part of their practice, and most counselors are too. And I think that's wonderful because often students had to change counselors when they went to college. And now many of them are keeping their counselors and having all of their therapy virtually. Well, for some people that won't work, but for those that it does work, what are we doing in the environments in colleges to have those students have a place where they can talk to their counselors? Their dorm room may not be the best place. There may be a roommate around. They may need someplace more private or more quiet. So there's lots of things we're thinking about that have to change, and it's not just our students. So I put up this picture because I think it's an unusual set of swings, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do today is think in different ways. Think about not only what the pandemic has been like for you and your family, but what it's been like educationally for your kids and for your family. I know that our kids' education has impacted entire families during the pandemic, with students studying from home, and then with students being hybrid, and then some with students going back to campus if they were at college, but still having to study virtually. And I put up this picture for two reasons. One, to make you think outside the box, as I said, but the other is that sometimes out of the box is relaxing. This is a wonderful set of swings at a place called Park on D in Boston. And they're big, sturdy swings and hold up to 250 pounds. And when you go back and forth, they light up at night and they turn different colors. To make these even more interesting, the grid above them is solar. It's solar panels, and they provide energy to the two buildings that they're near. That's a very different way of thinking than the swings that most of us used at school. I was lucky enough when I was looking at these swings to meet the architect, and we're trying to put them on some campuses, and I'm trying to get them in some K-12 districts because I think it's a wonderful way for students to interact and to have the swings interact with them a little bit. I want you to think about this as we're talking, because that's really what our families have done during the pandemic. We've thought outside the box, we've thought differently. And because of that, we've seen our families and some of our children in a very different light. And some of that we really don't want to lose. So what we want to do is really wade in slowly. I know for me personally, getting used to being around people again was very different. I was used to working from my desk or from my table and maybe outside. I wasn't around a lot of people, and having to be around people, even in meetings that I've been in before the Delta variant got more prolific, it was a little uncomfortable. And you had to sort of remind yourself how to act around people. Our students might be uncomfortable about going back to classes and being in crowded hallways, about being near other people in class. Some will still be 3 to 6 feet apart. Some will have some plastic barriers between them. Every school is doing things a little bit differently, but you may want to talk to your students about how they feel about being around a lot of people again. And are they anxious? Are they excited? Everyone has a different idea. And I don't mean just because of the virus or because of germs, but how do they feel about being with friends and being with people? Maybe it has to start really slowly. Many of us had ridiculously hectic schedules, and some of our kids did too. And that was, for some people, that was a status symbol, how busy you were. A lot of people realized during the pandemic that it's okay not to be so busy, and that sometimes that actually felt good. And if that's the case, do you really want to go back to that 100 miles an hour that most of us were doing pre-pandemic? Or do you want to keep it about 65? And now may be the time to make that decision, and maybe encourage your kids to do one less activity or one less play or be on one less team. Maybe they don't want to, maybe they want to go back to the hectic schedule, but now's the time to think that through. We are about to drastically increase our interactions. When we're at home, we only were interacting on screen, or if we happen to be outside and we're near people. By going back to school, students are going to, and teachers are going to be around people all the time. For people who have social anxiety or any mental health issues, those interactions might be stressful, and people may not be ready or may be unsure of how they're going to act around other people. Are they going to remember how to act around their friends? Are they going to remember how to be cool? Or are they going to be non-cool? And are they worried about that? Sometimes making sure you practice some of that conversation. Some of us have gotten really used to being very quiet at home. And so it now takes a lot of energy to really listen and participate in a multi-person conversation, picking up on some of those nonverbal cues. And some of your students who are on IEPs, they may struggle with that nonverbal communication anyway. How are we going to get back to that? How are we going to get thrown back to that? And then add the masks that are now being required across the state in all the schools. Are students okay with that? Teachers I know say they can't see the students' faces or get reactions as much from the eyes. I think we all have to figure out, how are we going to deal with that? What masks are going to be the most comfortable, and what are you going to be able to wear all day at school? Are they going to build in mask breaks? Again, the student is not the only locus of change. What are they going to do to make this work for everyone, teachers and administrators included? I think we really have to wade into this slowly. And as families, you need to think about each of these things to see what would help your students most in order to go back to these stressful situations. Because there's many responses to this return to, and I'm using air quotes, normalcy. Because some people are calling it the new normal. Some people are not calling it normal at all. There are many people that are truly excited to go back to school and see their friends and see their students and have a routine. There's real joy in some people's faces and voices when they talk about returning to school. At the same time, there's some real fear and real anxiety. And not all of the fear and anxiety is about the virus. Some of it is about returning to a previous lifestyle and what may have worked and may not have worked. There's lots of anticipation. And for some, that's great anticipation. People are excited about choosing clothes and buying new books and backpacks. And for some students, there's real dread. If you're seeing your student not want to talk about school and not want to talk about clothes or backpacks or school supplies or not want anything to do with the conversation, you may want to touch base with someone at school, one of the counselors, to talk about how do I address this with my child at home. A lot of times we're using the idea of a new start. Let's think about this as a new start in the way you want to be a student. You haven't seen a lot of these people or done a lot of these things in 18 months. What do you want to do that feels good as a return to routine? And what do you want to not do anymore? I was working with one student who really had no interest in talking about going back to school at all. And neither the parents nor I were getting anywhere near what the reason was. And we were really kind of flummoxed by the whole thing because this was a student who used to love school. And it took quite a while, but after we finally found out, the student didn't want to play the clarinet anymore and felt like going back to school meant having to go back to band and clarinet lessons and all of that. And once the parents said, you don't need to play any instrument if you don't want to, it was like the cloud lifted. Yes, now I can go back to school. But sometimes we need to really look at what might be bothering the student that we're not hearing or that we're not listening to find out what it is. And maybe the student isn't communicating it. But let's really think about what we want to keep and what we might want to drop. We know that a lot of people are dealing with really heightened anxiety about this return to school. And we know that that really interferes with self-regulation and that it's a core feature of most issues dealing with mental health. Anxiety is probably the number one issue. But we also know that students really need active coping strategies as part of the returning plan. It's very difficult to just go back to school not knowing how to deal with the anxiety. So this is a graphic I frequently use with autism, but it's true also with many mental health issues, or most. Many have comorbidities of sleep disorders or disruptions and GI symptoms. Many have selective eating or problems eating. Some folks also have seizures or a form of epilepsy, and many also have ADD or ADHD. But the number 1 and 2 issues for most people with mental health issues, and especially with autism, are anxiety and depression. So I want to think about that for a moment in returning to school, because, and this is work that comes from Prezant and Fields Myers, who teach us that the opposite of anxiety is not calm, it's trust. What I've been hearing from a lot of students is, you keep telling me, Jane, that I'm going back to school, but last time I went back, then I had to go home. And then I was hybrid. And then they were trying to get us back, but then we really couldn't. And we went back and it really wasn't the same. And so what is it going to be like? And if you can't tell me, how am I supposed to be calm? How am I supposed to trust that what you tell me returning to school is going to look like what my mind's eye sees as going back to school? And we really can't answer that. We all wish we could. We wish we could say, on October 1st, this pandemic will be over. I'd like it actually to be September 1st, but we can't say that. So how do we get people through and that trust? Because what this tells us from Prezant and Fields Myers is that autism or any mental health issue truly is a disability of trust. If I can't trust how I'm going to feel, if I can't trust that I know what's going to happen, if I can't trust that the people around me really understand me, all of those things are what creates the anxiety. And I think we have to think about that because this is certainly an anxious time for all of us, because all of us parents are anxious about how are our students going to do. Are they going to be okay? And the students can feel that anxiety from us, whether we express it in words or not. So let's talk about some of these changes and what we do about them. So we know that many of our students really react poorly to change in routine and that they're really anxious to know what's going to happen and what is it going to look like. All we can really do is reassure students to help quell the anxiety. And we can't say, you're going back to school in person, and I promise you'll be in person for the rest of the academic year. We cannot say that, but we certainly can say, I know you didn't like being home and online, but if we have to go back to that, I promise I will be here to help you and we'll do the very best we can. We all hope you're going to stay in school in person all year. There's really nothing more we can say because none of us really know how to plan for the next few months. We're all concerned about coursework and motivation going back. Are our students really motivated to complete their work independently? Were parents or older siblings overly involved while students were studying at home? And can the students tear themselves away from all that assistance, or just knowing that maybe my big brother or big sister or multiple siblings were all at the table doing work with me and now we're all going to be in separate schools? Can people initiate those assignments and get back to a more rigorous academic schedule than they may have had remotely? And I think the best thing we can do is assist students with structure and with schedules. Many students are not used to having a schedule again. Some students were in person, and I'm not sure about individual districts, but many districts were in person at least part of last year. If we can help people get back to that type of structure with a calendar or however students are most comfortable doing it, that kind of knowing what's going to happen next can really help calm some of the anxiety. So that can be helpful because many of our students really do thrive with structure. Most of us do too. Wasn't that the hardest part? Is suddenly we lost our routine, we lost our structure, whether it was waking up and going to the gym or waking up, having coffee, having breakfast, getting in the car, and whatever it was. Even that time of the commute, whether people were listening to music or a podcast on the way to school, things that they lost in that routine. Again, if we can make a schedule to structure the day and maybe really sit down with your students and think about what did you enjoy about the morning routine before school? Was it a relaxing breakfast? Was it having time to read the paper? Some kids like to read the paper online or a hard copy paper. Was it the commute and having time to chat with mom or dad, or to not chat with mom and dad and listen to some music? Make sure and remind students of that and to build it right back into the schedule to structure the day. We've dealt with lots of isolation and social distancing now, even when we go back to school, may force more isolation than we're used to. So especially for our students with any kind of social anxiety or any type of anxiety, we really want to encourage them to keep up social contacts. Just because we're going back to school in person doesn't mean you can't talk to friends on Skype or FaceTime or Zoom. And using that maybe even as the hook to say to students, I know you're anxious about being with people at school, but when you can come home, you can talk to your friend in another state on Zoom, just like you did all through the pandemic, or your cousin or your grandparents or whoever it is. Study groups and multiplayer games can really help with some social continuity if people need to sort of separate from that online experience. But we need to be very aware that especially since the pandemic, we've seen an increase in screen and game addiction because we've all spent so much time online. And now separating from that, if you have kids at home that are really addicted to their screens, and it's some of us too, let's face it, make sure you build in hours during the day with no screen time. It's very obvious to all of us who are meeting with students virtually when they're engaged in the meeting and when they're playing a video game. And we call students on it all the time. The students really think we don't know. It's so obvious. And it's really important to build in that non-gaming and non-screen time, especially with students going back to school in person, to get people used to listening and being present in the room without being in a screen with blue light. So build in more of that time each day to really assist students. So timers help. A little timer on your screen can make you realize, oh, I've been on the screen for 2 hours, but also regular meals, getting outside, sleeping regular times. Hopefully all of you are now building to an earlier bedtime and an earlier waking time, getting those kids ready for the first day of school. So it's important, if you have a few days or even a week, to start that bedtime earlier and no screen time when you're trying to calm down and get ready for bed and relax, and getting up earlier, even if it's still a couple days of summer. We really need students to do that. I want to go through just some pieces of this because this is one of the most useful documents I've seen during the pandemic. It comes from the Center for Academic Innovation at the University of Michigan. And I'll leave this up for a minute if you want to take a picture of the URL. And it talks about study habits. It was written at the beginning of the pandemic. I see it also really useful now as we go back to school and return to in-person. It was meant to do the other way, but I like it on both ends of the pandemic. So I'm just showing you a few pieces of it. They suggest you use this resource as a starting point, because things may feel very out of control right now with unknowns and disruptions. And this is what I like. Try to be patient with yourself, your classmates, and your instructors during this time. Take care of your well-being first, and making a plan and adjusting your studying may help you feel even a little sense of control. I think one of the things this brings up that we don't think about is not only being patient with ourselves, but our classmates are going through all of that too. And so are the instructors. Now we expect the teachers and the instructors to really be setting the tone for our kids in returning to school. And some of them might do that better than others. We don't know what kind of anxiety they're dealing with. Some of them may have been laid off or had a spouse laid off. Some of them may have taken a new job because they have to be closer to home. They may be starting in a new place, or maybe just struggling themselves with the return. And the students need to hopefully have a little reserve that they can help not only themselves, but think about other people like their classmates and their instructors. Of course, not for younger children, but some of the older kids or high school students, I would expect that kind of empathy to the rest of the people in their school community. Your study habits may need to change. While more of your coursework and teamwork may have to be online or in person, here are some strategies to keep in mind. I changed a little bit of their wording this way because for any of you who have kids who are going off to college, many of the colleges I've talked to are staying at least 60 to 75% online. Depends where, depends on the college, depends if they brought everybody back and had an outbreak and sent people home. So it depends on where you are in the country and what's happening. With most of our K-12 settings, people are going back to school. So staying organized. With so many things changing in your school life, you might be reliving that first week of class confusion at a finals week pace. I have quoted that line, I don't know how many times during the pandemic, and it's still true now with the return. that first week of class confusion at a finals week pace. And that makes sense to so many of us, that confusion of where's my class and how do I get there? And do I have time? And oh gosh, there's a friend, and which is my teacher and what was their name again? But that finals week pace of, oh my gosh, I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to get the bus, and all those stressors, many of which we haven't had to deal with in 18 months. So staying organized and knowing what you need to do. We're going to talk in a few slides about previewing, and that can really help. So setting a schedule to provide structure, it can also really help keep people motivated. And exercise and self-care. I was seeing more K-12 students and college students incorporate some exercise during the pandemic than ever before. I think people were so tired of just being inside that they started doing online exercise or yoga or meditation or something. And keeping that built in can be crucial to a successful return for all of us, parents included. Trading your strategies for new ones. Your routines may have to adjust during this time. Look for ways to adapt your habits or form new ones. What a wonderful opportunity. We have the chance right now to make new habits and see if there's things that we could do better. And that's exactly what we want to reinforce to our kids. What would you like to do better, and how can I support you in that? So we really want to work as a team. For a family team, think about during the pandemic, and did you have dinners together that you never could do before because people weren't home? They were at practice or rehearsal or lessons or activities. And during the pandemic, it was quiet enough and you couldn't go out a lot, or you were getting takeout, that you actually sat down in a room together and had dinner and maybe even had conversation. Do you want to keep that after the pandemic? And if it's not possible every night, do you want to say as a family, you know what, that has been really nice. And at least you fill in the gap, 1, 2, 3 nights a week, 5 nights a week. We're going to sit down as a family and have dinner whenever we can. And that's going to be really important to everyone. And then we all saw different reactions from siblings. Did the siblings get closer? Were they fighting constantly? Did they actually find things they liked to do together that they wouldn't admit, of course? But let's say you had a puzzle out on a table, a folding table, and every once in a while they would both go by and put pieces in. And then actually after a few weeks, they were both sitting at the puzzle and working on it. Did that work? Was there a connection that you don't want to lose? Think about some of those pandemic activities that you want to build in. And every once in a while, take out a new puzzle and just put it on a table. You don't have to say, okay, it's puzzle time, everyone. Don't do that. Just leave it out and let it happen. Are there other things you did? Did you have movie night? What kinds of things did everyone really enjoy doing together? And what do you want to keep doing? And then the friends, they have to be part of the team. Those social connections are important. We know how important they were when we lost all those connections during lockdown. How are we going to keep those up when we go back to these really busy schedules? And for people who are really struggling with anxiety, can they just have their 1 or 2 friends and find a good way to connect with them? Are they going to do homework together after school? Are they just going to meet online? Are they going to get together on the weekends? Those kinds of things you want to build in. And then what I've talked to lots of people about is how they're missing their pandemic pods, that they had a pandemic pod of friends or neighbors or family, and that they're missing that quality time they had with those folks. And the kids are missing it too. And how do you build that back in? Do you say, okay, once a month, we're having a pandemic pod get together, and we're going to do one of the things we used to do during the pandemic, or we're going to have a meal with our pandemic pod, whatever it is. That was part of your team. And talk with that team about the return. What are people doing? How are they keeping some of those pandemic activities that worked for their family? How are they keeping those in the schedule? How are they making room in the schedule for some of those things? But think about those different teams and how they worked during the pandemic and what should change and what should not change? What are some of those pieces you want to keep? In the interest of time, I'm going to go through some of this quickly. This was from an All Things Considered broadcast on NPR on May 19th called Feeling Anxious About Returning to Post-Pandemic Society. You're Not Alone. And so I pulled a few quotes because I thought they were really, really useful. After a long, dark year, social muscles have atrophied. In-person gatherings now call for weighty questions about COVID-19 safety. And many people who during the pandemic found relief in empty calendars don't want to go back to the world as they knew it. Lucy McBride was one of the people on this broadcast. If nothing else, the pandemic has laid bare the critical importance of addressing our own mental health. And for some people, having optimal mental health is not just about getting COVID. It's about having time to sleep and relax. So I think we need to realize what it means to be human. It's more than the absence of disease. It's making our needs known and communicating those to other people. I think that last sentence is so crucial. You as parents need to let your needs known to your family, to your community, to the teachers, and you need to tell your kids that they need to let their needs be known and communicate them. Ekamini was the other person on this broadcast. I do understand that reluctance and hesitancy and grieving the fact that we had an opportunity for things not to go back to what they were. We could have begun to forge a new normal, a new way of life, a new way of thinking as it relates to work, as it relates to family. And those things have just not happened. In May, for this presenter, it had not happened. And I want you to think about today, while we've had a few minutes to discuss the return to school, what do you want to make sure happens as a new way of life, a new way of thinking, and a new normal? When you're dealing with a crisis like this, you can have post-traumatic stress, and we will all have that on some level. There's also something called post-traumatic growth. I think that there are moments in our lifetime, and this is one of them, where we can really think hard and think big about what the future should look like. There's a lot we should let go of and a lot we can improve on. In higher education, we've talked a lot about post-traumatic growth and how we would encourage that in students and in faculty and staff. How is our campus going to experience post-traumatic growth? And I've been fortunate to be in on a number of those conversations, and some have been incredibly fruitful. Some were fraught with that interpersonal anxiety that people just really couldn't get to the heart of what we were talking about. But think about how your family and your kids are going to experience some post-traumatic growth. What was good for them in the pandemic? I know that sounds odd to think about, but for some, like one student that I've been working with for a few years, and when I asked what was the best thing about the pandemic, this student said nonstop relief. Not having to interact personally was nonstop relief for me. And I realized that working and going to school remotely are going to be really important things for me. The student was a little older, and I think that realization and being told that that was okay to feel like that, because this person always said, I've always been told it's a bad thing to want to be alone all the time. If that's what makes this person happy, I think we have to respect that. This is an older student. But post-traumatic growth, think about that term. It's being used a lot, and we have to think about how we're going to see post-traumatic growth. So what do we do? Let's think about one step at a time. Let's really take this one step at a time and preview each new experience. Do you remember way back in elementary school, first thing that happened when you got to school in the morning, you looked on the board, whether it was a blackboard, green board, whiteboard, and there was a schedule of the day. that was a preview of your day. People knew what was coming next. There was a structure, and you could say, okay, I may not like reading time, but that lasts 20 minutes and then I get to do blank. Then I get to go to gym or art or something like that. We need to think about previewing new experiences. If your student's anxious about going to school, start today. Call the school and say, we need to walk into school today, and make sure our locker combination is still the same. And maybe we need to do that every day till school starts. And maybe we need to poke our heads in and see a few teachers and say hello, because that's going to help the anxiety. Please don't wait till the first day. That preview can help tremendously. Now, some schools might say, sorry, we're locked and we don't let anyone in. That may be the case, especially with COVID, but you can try. And I would say even go to the parking lot. If there's a playground, go to the playground, do something that gives that exposure. Don't add things back to your life that you really dislike, or to your kid's life. If they don't want to play the clarinet, please don't make them. Or that's just an example, of course, but whatever is the clarinet in your kid's life, really think about what there is and what you want to be in your life and in your family life. Appreciate what this experience has changed in us. No, the pandemic has been horrible and we've lost hundreds of thousands of people. But going through all that, what has it changed in us? Have we changed our values? Have we changed our thoughts about family or about education? And how do we want to experience that? And please, if the stress and anxiety are overwhelming for you, your kids, your family members, your neighbors, please recognize it and talk with someone. Talk with a professional, get some references from school or from the state or from your town, because we need to develop strategies in order to deal with that. Because what we know is that things are going to keep changing for a while. And we need to remember what we have, what we value, and what we hold dear, and keep that with us no matter what else changes. I put this as a moment of calm. I know a lot of videos now are giving us a moment of calm. And I think I only have a final slide. So if you want to think about some questions, and please put them in the Q&A, we have a few minutes for discussion. I want to let you know also that what I'm hearing a lot from college students as they're returning to school, luckily for me, many of the people I work with are fairly excited about returning to school. Some are a little unsure, but fairly excited in general. But many of them, since the pandemic, are really reassessing their major and their career choice, if they have had one in college. And what I keep hearing from them, which I think is I forget what we're calling this age group, but for this age college student, I think it's one of their terms. They're looking for pandemic-proof careers. Pandemic-proof careers. They're convinced that this is the first pandemic that they will see in their lifetime, as opposed to us who are older significantly, and that there hasn't been a pandemic in 100 years. They feel like this may happen again in their lifetime, and they want to make sure, after seeing so many people lose their jobs, they want to make sure that they have a job that can be done remotely, that can be done anywhere, and can be done during a pandemic. And that may be very smart on their end, and they're also looking into things that they want to do instead of things that they need to do. And maybe we need to take some hints from them. So I know many of us use the beach to keep calm. And so I'm putting this as a calming slide. These are our books, which I'll just flash through, and how to get in touch with me, because we'll go through some questions now. If you have questions that you don't want to ask or answer in a group, please feel free and email me, jane@collegeautismspectrum.com. And so my other calming slide, some people like mountains, some people like oceans, so I'm trying to give you a little of both. So with that, I'll stop and ask Janine and Eve and Carolina, do we have any questions?
Right now we don't, but it usually takes a little bit.
Sure.
Uh, People are typing.
Well, if that's the case, I'll stop sharing. I guess everybody's had their moment of calm. That's it. No more moments of calm. Now you got to look at faces. Oh, we got Kelly's dog to look at. Thank you, Kelly. That'll calm us all. So, no, that was good. I liked that. So I hope I didn't make you all more anxious. I hope that was not my intent. If I was made you more anxious thinking about all of this.
No, definitely not. In fact, I love how you really describe that it's not just up to our kids to adapt to the environment, but it's up to our environment to adapt to bringing the kids back. I think that's really important. What are some of the things that you've seen schools do, whether it's colleges or K through 12? What are some of the things you've seen them do to anticipate the students coming back?
I'm seeing some really good things that we've been encouraging for years, but like telemedicine, it was no, we can't do that. Now they can. I'm seeing the mental health counselors and availability increase. And that stigma that years ago may have been attached to mental health does not exist anymore. I'm seeing things like therapy dogs, even on move-in day, where we were lucky if we were able to bring in some therapy dogs during exam week because it's high stress. And now suddenly at move-in, a lot of people had therapy dogs. I've gotten more questions in the last 4 weeks about sensory rooms than I have in the last 5 years. For about the last 5 years, I've been setting up sensory rooms or calming rooms on college campuses, in residence halls, in communal spaces, and student unions. Sometimes they're pop-ups during exams, and they're really just a place to calm. Usually some noise canceling headphones and comfortable furniture like bean bags, lowered lights, some plants, a whole host of things that we do, that we put in these rooms. And I had set up about 20 before now on different college campuses across the country. I must have had 30 requests for information, what to put in the sensory room, how much will this cost, where should we put them? Gee, we put one in, we're putting 8 more sensory rooms, and that faculty and staff are using them too. So I think the attention to mental health issues, the wait in slowly idea, people are moving people in slowly, giving everybody a little more time, giving people more time because of the social distancing. I think that's really been important, and people are breaking cohorts into smaller groups, where maybe it was in their major a cohort of 60 that sort of traveled between classes together. Now it may be 20 or 30. And I think all that's good. I hope it stays. I think all of that is really good. A lot of other places are just sort of waiting to see what happens. Nobody's quite sure. And many schools are still trying to figure out how much of their education should be online and how much should be in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have, you kind of touched a little bit on it, but we did get a question in. Would you recommend some of the same strategies to recognizing barriers, accommodations to students coming into new schools, or perhaps transferring into new schools? Waiting in slowly, planning ahead, all seems like good ideas.
Absolutely, especially the things like previewing. Think about when a student's going to a new school. You always have like a visit day. You go in and meet the teacher. You might not stay. You might go and say, wave to the class. See where you're going to put your lunch. All of that. I think for a new school that it's even more important during the pandemic to do that. If we think about it, really in the same way we would do something. Imagine starting a new job, we meaning parents. Imagine starting a new job and think about what you go through that morning. What am I going to wear? Do people get really dressed up? Are they kind of casual? Is this no jeans? Do I wear a suit? That kind of thing is the first thing in your head. And then you go to, do I bring my lunch? Is there a place to go get lunch? What am I supposed to do? Where do I put my bag? Do I have to lock it up somewhere? Do I have to worry about that? There's so many things that we think about, and yet we send our kids to school and say, have fun. And yet when we're going through it, think of all of that stress and anxiety that we put ourselves through, thinking about all those little pieces. Where do I park? Is this where people are supposed to park? Do I need a parking pass? I'm getting myself anxious just thinking about all this stuff. And I'm not starting a new job. But it's all this stuff that makes you really kind of get ramped up. And students, especially at a new school, need to see all that. Where's your locker? What's the combination? Let's try it a few times. You don't want to be that kid that can't get the locker open. That can be a huge source of stress. And that doesn't mean you have any mental health issues or you're even going to a new school. Do you know the cool terminology for this area? That's always an issue. And I wish people would sort of print in my neighborhood, here's what we use for these terms. We don't get that kind of list.
There's another question in the chat. Any tips on how to help a student with changes in staff and lack of consistency? Her expected 6th grade teacher got a new job and left, and they are now looking to hire a new teacher.
That's the hardest. Hardest meaning they're looking to hire a new teacher. In other words, they don't have one yet, which means you're going to have a sub. And then I think whoever the sub's going to be, which I would say they know who that is now, get a picture, get some sort of picture of that person that you can show to the student so that they know what the person looks like visually, and let them know that this is your substitute teacher and that the other teacher couldn't stay for whatever reason. And that, yes, changes are hard and the whole class is going to have to change, not just you. And that maybe, I always find, depending on what grade the student's in, I'm assuming it might be a student who's, you said 6th grade, is that? See if your son or daughter can write a letter to the teacher saying, that they miss them and then they really didn't want them to go and that they're sorry they can't have. That often will prompt a response from the teacher, and the student will just feel very special that the teacher who left sent her a letter or a card, and that can really help. Don't be surprised if the teacher uses the student's present school address as a return address. Teachers are usually told not to use their home address as a return address on any mail to students. But that might really help with the transition. And the same thing when the substitute leaves and the hired teacher comes in. You never know. Sometimes the substitute gets hired as the long-term teacher. Sometimes. I know many school districts are really looking for teachers right now. So because I know they're trying to credential a lot of people who either just graduated or about to graduate, since so many districts need teachers.
Jean, you also pointed out such an important point earlier about really getting not only ourselves, but our students more in touch with what they need and being able to verbalize that. And I think, especially in a situation where you have a sub, it's really important for the kids to be able to vocalize no matter what age. I need a break. I need a mass break. I need to do this. I need this. I need help. I don't understand. I think that's so important. And when a student hears sub, they automatically think that it's going to be a teacher who can't meet their needs, right?
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Janine. You're so right. And what I wish is every sub would walk in, that's going to be there for more than a few days, would walk in and say to the students, will you all write down 4 things you want me to know about you? Everybody write it down, and I'm going to keep it so I can refer to it. And that kind of thing. And then saying the most important thing, I don't know you and you don't know me. So if you need something, you have to ask, and the line I always use, especially with younger students, is I was a really good student, but I flunked mind reading. I flunked it. And so you have to tell me if you need something, because I can't read your mind. And you know what, even college students react to that when I say to them, hey, I might say it in a different way, like, hey, I flunked mind reading. If you don't verbalize it, I can't help you. I think, honestly, I wish every teacher would say something like that to students to encourage them to communicate, because I think that was part of the issue that we learned during the pandemic, is that none of us We're all parents. Let's talk brass tacks. If you have a spouse that you live with, you have spent more time with that person in the last 18 months than you have. And I've been married 35 years, and he and I have spent more time together in the last 18 months than we have in 35 years. We had some real illuminating talks about communication, because suddenly we were working and living constantly with just the two of us. And that was very different for people who lead very busy lives and travel a lot independently. I think all of us experience that and have a new way of communicating, and we need to encourage our kids to that's a definite pandemic keep. And if you didn't do enough of it during the pandemic, it's post-traumatic growth. Let's make sure that our kids know to talk to us and to talk to the teachers about what they need. Are the schools building in mask breaks?
Yes, in Wilton, they will have them in school, like inside, but they are not requiring them outside or at PE. So there will be, like they can go outside and take them off. So
Okay.
a little bit less than last year, but in their inside, they usually got like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. But it's hard. Like they were going to empty a whole middle school for mask breaks. I mean, you're talking hundreds of students. I mean, this is not an easy feat.
No, it isn't at all.
So,
And the hope is it the same in Wilton? We're being told that they'll reevaluate at the end of September.
yeah, because I guess our mask mandate, which I'm sure is in Darien as well, it's a governor mandate until at least September 30th.
Oh, is that one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Initially they were going to leave it up to the school system, but now they're just doing it at least to September 30th, and who knows what happens after that.
Wouldn't
It
it be?
also probably depends on how many students are vaccinated, how many teachers are vaccinated, and then we'll go from there, I guess.
Right.
Again, one of those like I get from my kids all the time. How long do I need to? Why do I need to wear a mask now? I'm vaccinated. I've been out. I've been doing all this stuff, and
I
now
know.
it's like, no, sorry, you're back in again. And
I
sports,
think that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
That's that trust thing. But you
Yeah.
told me once I was vaccinated, I know.
Yeah.
But I thought that's the way it would be. That's
Right.
really the hardest piece. Yeah.
So I don't see any more questions.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
Can't imagine I answered all of them. I think we're all waiting to know the questions.
yeah,
That's hard. I think for a lot of students at colleges, even moving in, they were happy but anxious but unsure. But it's like, and all I kept thinking is, if these were younger kids, they'd be saying, I'm feeling all the feels. I don't know how to express it. I'm just feeling all the feels. And that's really what I've been getting from them, is I just don't know. I'm not sure how things are going to work out. And so I'm not sure how to feel about it. But, I think all it really takes is time. If we can give ourselves the gift of time and just say, let's see how today goes. And we have sort of a mantra in our house that we take things day by day, and that doesn't work. We take things hour by hour. And when that doesn't work, we take things minute by minute. And we've had many times during the pandemic that we were minute by minute because of emergencies within our family. And knowing that, and that we were in a minute by minute, that's okay. We're in minute by minute. We're going to get back to hour by hour, and then hopefully we'll get back to day by day. But I think sometimes when we can just let ourselves know that, well, I'm doing a similar presentation on Friday for a college, but what we're calling it is the road back to campus has many speed bumps. And I think that's really what we need to think about, is that this is going to be a bumpy road, and that the best thing we can do for our kids is be calm and reassuring and try and help them to feel that they can trust that whatever happens, you're going to be with them. And that's what's important.
Wonderful advice, Dr.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And good luck to everyone. I hope it goes well and that everyone stays well.
Good luck
Well,
to you
Thank you.
too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll have to have a post-pandemic growth, some seminar at the end
Yes.
of this.
Yeah.
And
Pandemic
see
growth,
how
I like it.
everybody,
There's your title.
everybody fared out.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank
Bye,
you so
Jane.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
That was great.
Kelly.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.